So I'm Tony, been a therapist for 22 years. I've worked with all sorts of different folks, and I want to just disclose here, I'm not a grief and loss specialist. This is not the primary thing that I do. However, I do counsel people on grief and loss. Back about 15, 16 years ago, I ran a grief and loss group for adolescents at a residential facility in northern Indiana. And so what I'm coming to you today, I'm coming to you from someone who's had a lot of experience sitting with people, talking with people, working with people who've lost quite a bit in their life. And we've all lost something in our life. I'm going to go ahead and give you another disclaimer here that this might not be a typical conversation you would have here in Moore Hall on a Sunday, because this may make you upset because we're talking about loss, and loss makes us upset. It's actually interesting. There's a phenomenon in therapy where you schedule a final appointment for a client, and it's going to be the last time that you all see each other. And does anyone know what happens? The client doesn't show up. They don't show up. Now, for some of them, they probably just don't want to pay the $91.23 that Anthem says they have to pay. But for most of them, they don't want to say goodbye, because it's hard to say goodbye. And so we start today with, what happened there? Look at this. Well, anyways, we start today with, Steve asked me to do a presentation before he left. And I said, sure, we can do that. And so the title itself is something I just kind of came up with on the fly. But the title is important, especially after the colon. And the idea is that we have to allow grief to exist in our life, because it's going to exist whether we want it to or not. And so how do we live with that? How do we adapt to that? Not how do we get over it, but how do we live and adapt to it? And up here I've got a picture of a pothos. And the pothos is at my house. It's important to me. It's at least 30 years old, I think. Pothos, I think they last forever. It's important to me, number one, because I didn't kill it. And I mean, I've killed a cactus. Like, I am not good at keeping plants. But this was my grandmother's pothos. Her name was Dorothy McGuire, and she died in 1999. And this is, besides pictures of her, this is the one thing I have of my grandmother's. We called her Great Dorothy because she had over 30 great-grandchildren. She had 29 grandchildren, and so she was Great Dorothy. She was wonderful. She saved money during World War II, which was like impossible to do on like no money at all. She had 6 kids. My mother was number 4 of 6. And each one of her kids had like 6 kids. I'm one of 6. And my family is interesting because every man in my family is about the same height. We're all about 5'8", 5'9". My brother Michael is a genetic freak. He's about 6'2". He's a big guy. He's got a head like an Easter Island statue. He's just enormous. And growing up, when my father left, my brother was my rock. He was always there for me. And I saw him like a father. I'm getting emotional just talking about it because we're talking about loss. And that's okay. It's okay for me to be emotional talking about it because that's how I feel. Michael was as strong as he could be, and at the funeral for Great Dorothy, so many people were there. Michael didn't cry at all. Michael didn't cry during the visitation. He didn't cry during the funeral. He didn't cry during the little service at the cemetery afterwards. Everyone cried. Everyone missed her. It wasn't, she was 84. She led a good life. She died of emphysema. But everyone loved her. We all cried. Michael didn't cry. He was as strong as he always was. We're leaving the little enclosure at the cemetery in Louisville, and as we're leaving, my mom is sobbing. She's walking. We're all walking out with her. And, she's got her 6 kids with her and all the grandchildren and stuff. And my mom just says, I want to go see Daddy's grave. The second the word Daddy came out of her mouth, my 6'2", giant, solid brother fell to the ground. Absolutely just destroyed. My grandfather was my father's rock. My grandfather was his father in a lot of ways. And he'd been dead for 15 years. Since that time, Michael owned a home. He was a father of 2. But it didn't matter. It came out of nowhere for Michael. And grief comes out of nowhere. The triggers to grief you can be sitting there and start bawling. You also don't know what's going to happen when you go to a funeral. Because when you go to a funeral, all those other griefs and all those other losses, they all come back up. And so to understand grief and loss, I think we have to kind of understand how we've kind of conceptualized it over the years, especially in this culture here, and what models for grief and loss work. Now here's the thing. Grief and loss does not have a perfect model. There is no perfect model. The one that most people know about is the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross model, or the 5 stages of grief and loss, where you have denial, some people call it shock and denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. What a lot of people don't know, I'm sure some of you already know this, but a lot of people don't know this, this was not a model for how do you deal with the loss of someone. This was a model based on her work with people who were terminally ill, who were dying, their acceptance of their own death. And somehow, like we do sometimes, we just kind of say, well, this is the model for everything. But it's not. People don't go through perfect stages. It's a good framework to think about how the brain has to get used to the idea of loss. But at the same time, it's not a perfect model. And there was a lot of criticism about this model for years, and professionals kind of came up with, I think, a little better models, but they're still not perfect. Another model that has been used quite often is the dual process model. This came out in 1999. Margaret Strobe and Hank Schutt created this model where you're basically oscillating between 2 different types of coping. The loss-orientated type of coping, where we're focused on the emotional impact of the person being gone, the dealing with that pain, and also the restorative, which is not necessarily restoring yourself. What it is how do you continue to go on and live in a practical way in life, right? This person's no longer with me. And that could be through death, that could be through divorce, that could be through just people leaving, right? Oftentimes in a breakup, someone has to get used to the idea of like, they're not with me anymore, right? And so how do I live my life without them? Other models have kind of gone on to look more about how do we continue to have the bond between me and the person who's gone, right? They're not physically here with me through death, but they are here in my memories. They're here in how I exist in my everyday life. And so the continuing bonds model, which came out in the 1990s, kind of later 1990s, is another model that just kind of looks more at how do we continue to relate to this person, right? And so they're not here with us physically. How do we relate to this person, emotionally? How do we relate to this person and honoring them in our daily lives? And one of the good things that comes out of this model is the idea of normalizing grief behaviors. My brother was supposed to be strong, and but he wasn't, because he's human, and he was strong because he was human, and he cried because he wanted to cry, because that was it. He just wanted to cry, right? His body told him to cry. He cried. That's it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with so many of the behaviors that come out of grief and loss. There's nothing wrong with some of the thoughts and the feelings that we have. It's just how we get used to the idea that someone's not there. Oftentimes we think we have to be prescriptive and say that, you have to be strong, you have to honor them, you have to do all these things, and you don't. You don't. Everyone's grief is their grief. How you experience the loss of your father is not the same way someone else experiences the loss of their father, right? And so the idea of normalizing grief is understanding that other people have gone through this, is to understand that what you're going through makes sense for you. It makes sense for you. And it's funny because my 12-year-old recently asked me, my father died in January of 2025. And she asked me the question, she said, were you sad when your father died? And I thought about it for a second, and I had to be honest. I said, I was not. I wasn't sad when my dad died. And she said, well, that's sad. And I was like, honey, I don't know if it is. I know that that's how I felt. I wasn't sad. And she's like, why? And I said, well, because I cried about him for years. I was upset about him for years. And I felt like there was so much grieving that went on by the time that he actually did die. I'd cried myself out. I just didn't feel that sadness that you're supposed to feel for a father, right? Now, on the other hand, I had a person who I barely knew who died when I was in college, through one of the ways that we don't like to talk about death, but through the completion of suicide. And that ate me up for weeks. So why am I crying over this person and not my father? Well, because grief hits us different ways. The relationship that we have with the person or the idea of the person is different. I still don't know why I was so upset about that, but I was upset. And so at some point I just had to accept the fact that that's what my body was doing, that's what my brain was doing, and that's how I felt about it. There's not a perfect model, but I do have to pick one model to talk about, or I wouldn't have a talk today. And so the one that I kind of want to talk about today is one from William Warden, who actually worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And I like this because this is just task for dealing with grief. It's not like Ross's where they have stages and you go through this progression. You can work on any of these tasks whenever you want to. It's not like you have to do the first task and the second task. It's not like you even get them all right. It's not like you even do them all perfectly, right? But the idea is that when we are dealing with loss, we do have to kind of deal with certain realities, and we have to continue to live. And so he has 4 tasks associated with grief and loss, and one is the acceptance that you've lost the person, the reality of that, right? We must accept that we've lost the person, very, very literally, that we've lost the person, right? Processing the pain of the loss, and that's just dealing with the sadness and the anger and the frustration, all the emotions that come. Adjusting to the new life without them. So how do we, if a wife dies, if a husband dies, how do we deal with the children? How do we deal with the finances? Something as practical as that, but also, how do I deal with my social situations? I was friends with them because they were friends with my spouse. I was friends with them because they were associated with this person. Do I still talk to them? What's that like? And then also finding the lasting connection to the deceased through honoring them, through thinking about them. But even then, the relationship changes. Even then, how we think about people changes, right? And so if we took each one and we looked at each one, I know this is a lot of material, but the first task that we're going to look at is task number 1. Accept reality of loss, okay? So this doesn't mean getting over it. Accepting a reality doesn't mean getting over it. We just don't get over the loss of someone because we're supposed to, or because this is good, healthy progress. This is just accepting that they're gone. We accept it in very, practical ways, like we said before, that perhaps they're not helping with the finances anymore. Perhaps that they are not going to be there for, they're not going to be there for Christmas this year, right? But also we have to do this emotionally. This person was someone who supported me. This is somebody who I loved. This is someone who I love to love, right? This is someone who I really enjoyed the time we spent together. How do I deal with that emotionally? Well, I have to accept the fact that I can't lean on them that way anymore. Accepting it cognitively, right? They're not going to be there for family vacation. When I talk about them, maybe I should talk about them in the past tense, maybe the present tense, whatever kind of makes sense, right, to you. If you see them more now spiritually and as a soul, maybe talk about them in the present tense. But how do I think about this differently? How do I wrap my head around this, right? And when we're dealing with the acceptance that someone has gone, and we just have to know that, a lot of times we're told certain myths. A lot of times we're told, how to get over something. Once again, that idea of getting over it. It's kind of silly. But our grief is our grief. It's different for every individual. There's similarities, but everyone deals with grief differently. And so one of the things to think about is there are myths that go along with grief and loss. Now, let me slow down here a little bit and talk about the myths a little bit more. The idea that it's healthy to just move on. Okay, I'm one of those people who don't believe in absolutes. There's very few absolutes. I mean, death is an absolute, but other than that, I don't believe in too many absolutes. And so there are times when moving on does help, but not for every situation, not for every person. The context and the variables surrounding the person we've lost are important. You know, did we lose someone early? Were they young? My nephew died in 2021, and it was a shock. He was 19 years old, right? And it was a shock. And some of the advice that I heard, or some of the things I heard, I just had my ears open at the funeral. They didn't sound very comforting. He's in a better place. Well, it's comforting to some people. It wasn't comforting to me. It wasn't comforting to my children at the time because he wasn't here with us, right? He's not here. And so the idea that we either move on or that we have to deal with this in a certain way is kind of false. It's very false. Forgetting means you don't care. Forgetting can mean you're busy. Forgetting could mean that, you know, you have enjoyed something recently and you just hadn't thought about that person you lost. Forgetting what they look like sometimes is very common for people who've gone. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just your brain making sense of your world. You know, it's just your brain making sense of your world. There's a time limit when you should accept loss. It's been a year now. You should be better, right? It's been a year. You should be going out and doing stuff. I guess, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a perfect time that we set and say, oh, it's been, you know, it's 6 months. I should go out and I should start dating again, or at 6 months I should go out and do things that we used to enjoy together, right? There's nothing at all perfect about the timing of how you deal with loss. You deal with it when you deal with it. Time heals all wounds. It doesn't. It can maybe make the wounds not so painful, but I mean, it's still a loss. My brother still falls to the ground 15 years after his grandfather died, you know, with just the mention of his name. Time didn't heal that wound, right? Emotional acceptance means not being affected. So this is once again like the idea that like if we're not emotional about it, then we've probably gotten over it. No. I mean, if you're not emotional about it, once again, maybe you're busy. Maybe you're doing something else. Maybe, I mean, it doesn't mean that you just don't love the person anymore, right? But it also doesn't mean the opposite of that, which is like, you know, if I'm sad and if I'm distraught still 20, 30 years later, it doesn't mean that I haven't accepted certain aspects of it. It just means I'm sad, right? One thing I'll say to you, and I say this to my clients all the time, is the initial feeling you feel about something is never wrong. And guess what? You really can't control it. The initial feeling you feel for something, you really can't control it. It just kind of happens. It's the body telling the brain something's going on, and the brain trying to make sense of it. If I'm embarrassed for a reason. It's not, I don't know why I'm embarrassed. Oftentimes I'll have clients who come in and they're very sad, and they said, I've had a very sad week. I don't know why I'm sad. I've just felt really down and low. And this is not to tease about them or anything, but it's so common. I've done it too. They'll come in and they'll say, I'm so sad, and I don't know why I'm sad. And then in the therapy session, within 5 minutes, they are listing like 7 horrific things they had to deal with that week. And it's like they never even thought, oh, wait a second, yeah, I guess the anniversary of this death was important to me. Or, geez, I guess that, not getting the phone call back from my children was something that made me sad, right? They'll list all these things, and they'll just like, I don't know where this is coming from. It's coming from a good place. Those initial feelings we have come from good places. The initial feelings that we have, they come from a place that we can't control, right? And so when people talk about accepting your emotions, they're kind of talking about this. That initial feeling you have, it's never wrong, and you can't really control it. So, okay, let me get back to my place here. So the last one here on here is just we should feel guilt for feeling relief. If you feel relief, it's coming from a place that you can't control. If you feel relief after the death of someone, people think that you should feel guilty, and they think you should feel ashamed. But some people suffer for a long time. Some people take care of people for a long time. And when you feel that level of relief for some people, that is so normal, it's so human, it's so pure. It's just you feeling relief, right? And there's nothing shameful or guilty about it. We feel shameful and guilty about it because the thing is, the initial feeling's never wrong, but you better believe your second, third, fourth, and fifth thoughts about those things can be wrong, or at least can keep you stuck in grief, can keep you stuck in shame, can keep you stuck in embarrassment and in guilt. Those thoughts that we have about how we're supposed to feel, right? They can kind of keep us stuck in that pain for much longer than we need to. Okay. Am I going too fast? Okay. All right. So, processing pain and loss, Warden's second task. Okay, this is my favorite because this is what I do as a therapist. I'm not trying to be gleeful about people having to do this, but this is something that can really heal. This is something that can really heal. When we acknowledge our loss, when we acknowledge our feelings, and we work through those feelings, we are really doing something for ourselves, and we're doing something for the people around us. We are basically putting Band-Aids on ourselves and healing ourselves. And one of the ways we do this is to acknowledge and express the emotions. And I've got here, learn to sit with some feelings. For most emotions, it takes about, this is a little science here, it takes about 90 seconds for a feeling to kind of flush in and flush out of your body. Just an initial feeling. If you sit with an uncomfortable feeling, you can actually feel that feeling kind of drift a little bit. But most people don't do this. This is not something that's commonly done, is someone just sitting with a feeling. There's actually techniques you can use and whatnot. If y'all come back, next week, if we can talk a little bit more about that. How can we actually just sit with a feeling and allow it to exist, right? But that's the thing. Uncomfortable feelings, once again, they're there initially. We can't control them. They're not there for bad reasons. They're there for a reason. And once we sit with that feeling and we're able to kind of just notice it, the duration doesn't last as long as we thought it would. There is a caveat. If you're dealing with embarrassment, anger, frustration, if you're dealing with sadness, if you're dealing with fear, those feelings can flesh out pretty quickly. The one caveat to this is grief. And because grief is like getting hit by a wave of feeling, then another wave, then another wave, then another wave. It's not just one wave, it's several waves. Grief is complicated, therefore our feelings are complicated, right? Grief is intense, therefore our feelings are intense. So the caveat to the whole 90-second thing kind of falls on its face a little bit when we deal with grief. It really is one of those things that you can't just get rid of it in 90 seconds, but you can kind of sit with feelings for 90 seconds. You can sit with something that's uncomfortable because what you're doing is you're accepting that that's the feeling you're having. That's the feeling you're having. Seeking support through process. Loved ones, professionals, groups. Sometimes people find support through reading. They find support through coming to church. And everyone in here has lost someone. Everyone in here has lost somebody. Whether it be through death, whether it be through divorce, whether it be through them just simply moving away. We've all lost somebody. People can relate. And they may not be able to relate to every specific situation that you've had, but they can relate to the notion of loss, and there is support out there. But we do have to be willing just to kind of talk about it. Using healthy coping skills, I've just got a few examples here. Moving your body has always helped me. If I take a walk, that's always been very helpful. So just get up and moving. is something that actually can help. In cognitive behavior therapy, we talk about the connection between our actions, our thoughts, the situation, and our emotions. And the one thing that can kind of like change that system a little bit, if I'm feeling sad and I'm thinking sad, my body's probably doing something that's kind of sad, like not doing much. The one thing that can kind of change that a little bit is to get up and move. Once that action of moving occurs, things start to change a little bit. Doesn't mean you're happy. It just means things change a little bit. You don't have to sit in sadness for as long. Read, talk with friends, pray, breathe. Breathing's really important. It's important to kind of regulate our nervous system. Breathing and doing things that can kind of help you relax are important. It's important throughout the course of our day. There's a technique I use in between seeing clients called grounding, and I find it to be very helpful to get my brain ready for somebody else. It's very helpful for me to regulate my nervous system. It takes about 30 seconds. It's kind of awesome, actually. And so if y'all come back next week, maybe we can talk about that a little bit. And then for some people, it's setting good boundaries. It's learning to say no. I can't do too much. I'm grieving today. Right? I can't do a lot. I'm a person who normally just does for other people, so I've got to tell you no. And that's a pretty good coping skill. But it's not a good coping skill for everybody. Some people need to say yes, right? Some people don't connect. They don't try to be there for others. They would rather stay where they are, and they feel comfortable that way. And sometimes it's actually a pretty good coping skill for them to say yes to things, right? It depends on who you are. Everyone's coping skills are going to be a little bit different. Avoiding suppression. Okay, so initial feelings we have, totally normal. Can't control them. Sometimes they come out of nowhere. If we try to suppress it, they last longer. And other feelings we don't want start to pop up more often. If I am angry at someone who has died, and I try to suppress that anger, it comes out in other ways. I remember as a child, actually, the first time I'd ever even thought about the concept of someone being mad that someone died, because until that point, the only person who ever died was my grandfather. And I couldn't imagine anyone being angry that he died, right? And I remember I was about, I think in 6th grade or so, and I read a book that was pictures of the Vietnam Wall. And there was a letter that was laying there underneath a rose stem that the rose had been plucked off of. And it was the most angry, vile letter towards someone's brother for not coming back. And it didn't make any sense to me. How can you be angry at someone who died? Well, this person was, right? And we don't know all the facets of their life. We don't know all the facets of their heart and they're going through. But they were angry, and they expressed it. And people sometimes get really, really uncomfortable if you express anger over death. They get really uncomfortable. It's normal. It happens. I mean, Cooper Ross noticed it when dealing with terminal patients that, they were angry. Their family's angry. Why aren't you here? Right? So suppressing the feelings, not so good. The duration of how long something lasts for when it comes to the suppression of feelings, it's not perfect, but we can definitely decrease the duration of some of those feelings by not avoiding them. Okay, a few more myths. If you become emotional and cry, you will never stop. Anyone ever think this? Like if I start to get sad, I'm just going to cry forever, so I'd rather not cry. All right. No one thinks it, or they just don't want to raise their hand. Excellent. That's fine. There's a lot of folks who this thing I run into all the time. I don't want to feel this because if I feel this, I'm going to feel it forever. I'll never stop crying. You will. You'll stop crying. You'll stop crying. It might be a while, but you'll stop crying, right? It's okay to feel it. Crying and being vulnerable is a weakness. It just isn't. It just isn't. It's you being a human being. We don't want to suppress feelings, but I will tell you, for my grandmother's funeral, I suppressed my feelings until after the actual service. But I had a reason. I had to sing at the service. So my cousin and I were the two people who sang at the service, and so therefore I wanted to do a really good job, and I suppressed those feelings because I had a goal that I was working on. And sometimes people have to do this for their children, just for a little bit, right? Just for a little bit. So suppressing your feelings is not the best thing to do, but sometimes you do it because you've got to function. And it's not even sometimes suppressing feelings, like it's just doing something different, right? You must be strong for others by not showing emotions. It's kind of the same thing. Showing feelings are bad and need to be avoided. Boy, oh boy, people don't like it when people are emotional. They don't like it at all. They get really uncomfortable really quickly. And it's one of those things that I'm really grateful I've had 22 years of being a therapist, because man, it's almost like a magnet. If someone's crying, like I feel like, okay, I'll just stand next to them. I'll be there with them, because after doing it for a while, it just becomes a normal thing, right? It's normal to have someone crying. I was talking to my kid's mother about the nephew who had died, and we were talking about how we'll be sitting there and just tears out of nowhere, right? And I think I'm grateful that I'm around people who understand this is just part of it, right? This is just part of it. And so you don't have to be strong. You don't have to avoid these feelings. They just come up out of nowhere. There's a right way to feel. There's not. There's not a right way to feel. There isn't a right way to feel about things. You feel the way you feel about them, the way you feel about them. You must have. This is a big one. This one here is a big one. Because I want people to think about how this keeps us stuck in not experiencing other feelings, how this keeps people stuck in not seeing things differently, how this keeps people stuck in enjoying their life a little bit more. You must have gone through what I went through to understand. Some cases, there's some really specific things that go on with the loss of someone that other people are not going to understand. If you have a child and the child seems to be healthy and fine, and then they develop something, they develop a lifelong illness, that's something that most people don't really know what that's like, right? However, people can empathize with you on things changing in their lives. People can empathize with you on the losses they've had. And it's okay to allow people to empathize with you. It doesn't have to be perfect. The best drug and alcohol counselor I ever met in my entire life never did drugs and alcohol. And every one of those clients would be like, you've got to have gone through what I've gone through to really understand it. And you know what? That guy didn't have to go through what everyone had to go through. That guy was able to kind of help everybody out really well, right? Just because he had gobs of empathy. He had gobs of empathy for people. I don't have to have gone through everything you've gone through not to feel for you and not to want to sit there and be with you. So this is a myth, and it's one that I kind of run into all the time. Third task: adjust to the new life without the deceased. Let's see how we're doing on time here. Oh, better hurry it up. This is just, we have to kind of adjust practically through our external adjusting to what's our daily life look like, to the internal, shifting how we feel emotionally about it, how we think about the person, and even in some cases spiritually. Were you going to a church just because your spouse was going to the church? Is this really what you want to be doing? We have to readjust how we think things in the world and spiritually as well. Sorry, I'm kind of flying through this part here, but I wanted to make sure we had a little time at the end. Fourth task: finding a lasting connection. This one I really love. We can balance our memories of the person and live. The best piece of advice I ever had at a forum, a training in psychology, was training on something called dialectical behavior therapy. And the idea was you're synthesizing two ideas. And if I could leave you all with anything today, this is the one little piece of advice when it comes to dealing with loss and moving on. Or dealing with loss and, not moving on, but living your life. Get rid of the word but. The word but is a dirty word. B-U-T, one T. Place the word and in there. I have to go to work, but I'm dealing with all this grief. No, you have to go to work and you're dealing with all this grief. Those two things coexist. I'm so mad at my kid, but I have to give him a hug. No, you're mad at your child right now, and you should probably give him a hug, right? Ands are really important. It synthesizes these two things. They exist at the same time. I miss her so much, and I can't live with her any longer. I loved him so much, and he's not here. Those two things exist in one time. Keeping traditions alive, I have the pothos. I have pictures of my grandmother. When my brother-in-law died, very unexpectedly some years ago, we took his ashes to the University of Michigan to drop on the big house in the field of the football game. And my sister snuck down there, and she most certainly tossed his ashes on the football field, completely illegal probably, but did it anyways, right? We were honoring his memory. We're honoring his loss. There's so many ways we can honor people. When I was younger, after my grandfather had been dead for about 10 years, my cousin got married, and my grandfather's son, my uncle, had an entire pew that was dedicated just to my grandfather. And I remembering at the time thinking, oh, he hasn't dealt with his loss. Oh, there's something wrong with that. And there wasn't. There was something wrong with my expectations of how people should deal with loss. That's how he was honoring his father. Keeping meaningful connections, photos, stories, memories. Finding comfort in spiritual practices. Does it help you to come to church? Does it help you to be around people you love? Does it help you to read and to pray and to be out in nature? What helps you? More myths and reminders. Well, these are really reminders based on myths. There's no single right way to honor the dead. 2 weeks ago at a funeral for my friend's mother, and they honored her. One of the ways was having her pimento cheese sandwich recipe and her pimento cheese sandwiches in the break room of the funeral home. And he was so excited. My friend was like, this is my mom's recipe. It's the best pimento cheese you'll ever have. And so we went back there to have one. And let me tell you about this pimento cheese. It was okay. It wasn't that good. But to him, it was magic. To his sister and his brothers, it was magic when they ate it. This is mom, right? We've already told my mother when she goes, I hate to say it, but we want her fried chicken recipe, right? We need to know how she is making this fried chicken that she's made all these years. You can keep traditions alive, or you cannot keep traditions alive. You know, if Thanksgiving was someone else's thing and you don't like it, then order a pizza. You know, if going to certain people's houses at Christmas is something you never like to do, you can change traditions, but you can also keep them alive. You can keep the memory of someone alive through numerous traditions. I'm sure you'll have so many examples of how you do that. This is what I really want to point out here. Shame and guilt need to be examined, but not lived in. You're going to feel some shame. You're going to feel some guilt. Everyone does. You already have, I'm sure. Most people have. We can examine where they're coming from, what's going on, but we don't have to sit in them. We don't have to live in them. We don't have to sit and live in the shame and guilt. Your grief is different from other people's grief. Someone comes up and says, losing a mother is the hardest thing you'll ever deal with. It might not be. It might not be. You might have dealt with something harder, right? Your grief is not their grief. How we talk to people a lot of times reveals our grief. The goal shouldn't be to get over it. What I know, before I end today, just these are the things I know. I know that others will help you and they love you dearly. I know that we've lost people who are important to us, and the loss is important, but we're important too. And it's okay to keep living. No one has all the answers, and their way of dealing with loss may not work for you. It may not work for you. Life can be beautiful, and there are always new things to experience. Well, life is beautiful, and there are always new things to experience. And we can experience those things with loss. We might feel the same way. We can still experience them. So that's the whole little thing there. So if you all want to come back, if people want to come back next week, we're going to have a smaller one where we're kind of sitting around just talking. But that's what I have to say. I appreciate your all's times. And thank you. Hey, listen, this is a hard thing to hear. This is a hard thing to think about. and I appreciate your all's time. I really do, and I appreciate you all being here. My name's Tony. I'm here after church if y'all want to talk at all. If you need any resources for anything, let me know. But thank you very much, and you're all loved. Love you. Thank you.